Hello, Chipmunk and Chipette fans, and welcome back to another Alvin and the Chipmunks Elaboration podcast. My name is Grandy Tamayas, and today's topic will be, should there be a biopic film about Ross Bagdasarian Sr.? So, continuing my trend of talking about hypothetical chipmunk movies, this one is more of my own idea. Well, two ideas, but I'll get back to that later. Not to say that there aren't other fans who thought of this and want it, and maybe you will too after listening to this podcast, but the topic just hasn't been tossed around and discussed that much in the fan base. So I thought it would make for a unique elaboration, as I've done with a couple of my other uploads about questions that very few fans other than me have been asking, yet could have huge possibilities. Hopefully this will strike up some conversation, and who knows, if we get enough people aware of the idea and show that we want a Ross Bagdasarian Sr. biopic, then maybe someday it'll happen. So these days, it seems like biopics have been coming back into style. In 2018, there was Bohemian Rhapsody, last year there was Rocket Man, and I saw the Ford vs. Ferrari film not too long as of the writing of this video's script. The first two of those films I just mentioned were about musicians, so one about Ross Bagdasarian Sr. could fall into that same category. Granted, Ross's name hasn't really carried through the ages in the way that Freddie Mercury or Elton John have, so one about him probably would make nowhere near $1 billion as Bohemian Rhapsody almost did. The general public, even the parents who took their kids to see the live-action Alvin and the Chipmunks films, aren't likely to know who Ross is and what he had accomplished. So in order for the film to be a financial success, they would have to market it in such a way that, one, it would let people know that it has to do with a popular cartoon franchise that they love, even if it's not directly about that. Two, convinces an audience why they would want to learn about the story of Ross. And three, has a certain charm that's old-timey, suiting the time period it would be set, but doesn't seem bland to slightly more modern generations. Obviously not kids, mind you, because, let's face it, even if it has to do with cartoon characters, kids aren't going to sit for 2 hours and watch some adult, real figure going through a lot of normal life problems. And another reason why I think a Ross Bagdasarian biopic would be a good idea is because a couple of years ago, I saw one about Walt Disney and how he created Mickey Mouse, I'm not sure what it was called, and how he got through a lot of tough life problems. And kids love Mickey Mouse, but most or all of them have no interest in Walt. Speaking of tough life problems, would a story about Ross Bagdasarian Sr. set in the 1950s, telling how he created the Chipmunk Song and all that he had to overcome to do it, would it actually make for a great biopic plot? In other words, does the real-life situation warrant a film with a well-structured narrative that audiences could follow? I absolutely think so. Ross's creation of the Chipmunk Song is a rags-to-riches story, which could potentially form the basis for a near-masterpiece film, as history of cinema has proven. We could see Ross's financial struggles and how he risked pretty much everything on this one tape recorder, which was very expensive for the time. Maybe we could also see Ross in his days before that, like when he worked on a grape vineyard as a teenager and created Nuts to You, or his days in Seville, Spain during the Second World War, or maybe even after the success of the Chipmunk Song with The Alvin Show, the Chipmunks Sing the Beatles, and all the major events before his death in '72. Which I guess would be a pretty sad note to end on. Just hopefully there would be enough primary sources to get information from in order to reenact things as accurately as possible. Because who knows how many people are still alive who met Ross or had recorded detailed information about the events. Ross Bagdasarian Jr. only knows so much. Speaking of Jr., well, this may not seem as likely, but I would like to see a sequel film about how he and Janice Carmen revived the legacy in the 1980s. Maybe it could even be a trilogy if they had enough time and purpose to tell events like the making of the cartoon, the Chipmunk Adventure, and the Universal Studios lawsuit. Although I don't see them telling everything up through the live-action movies. That would be a little excessive. Now, I don't know a lot about casting for biopics, but I do wonder who they would get to play these real people. Most biopics have proven that it's the big names that sell the movies, like Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happiness, Michael Keaton in The Founder, Matt Damon and Christian Bale in the aforementioned Ford vs. Ferrari film. Those were all good casting choices for those respective movies, in my opinion. I don't doubt that there are big-name actors in Hollywood today that look even a little bit like Ross Sr., Jr., and Janice. I mentioned in a previous video that Tom Cruise is the same height as Ross Bagdasarian Sr., and he kinda looks like Ross if he were to get a rounder buzz cut. Although he is older than Ross was now when he died, so he might not be the best choice. Plus, he's more into doing action movies. Ross Jr. and Janice, I can't think of any actors for them off the top of my head right now. However, I think it would be better if they use lesser-name actors, perhaps ones for Ross Jr. and Sr. that have Armenian heritage. That way the scope is wider and maybe they can find actors that meet the age, height, and look requirements, and maybe put a little more emphasis on choosing ones with the best acting talent. Not to discredit the big names though, because they are famous for a reason. Let's also hope the Alvin and the Chipmunks brand name will bring in people just as much, if not more, than the actor names do. Otherwise, biopics about the creators wouldn't make that much money. Heck, I don't think any of them would make anywhere near as much money as Road Trip even did. If you can think of any lesser-known actors who you think would fit the bill, please let me know in the comments below. And since I'm getting to that point, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to listen. Hopefully I convinced you that you would want to see a film about Ross Bagdasarian Sr. with little to no action or comedy for 2 hours. I know it sounds boring, but there's really no way to make a film like that for kids. It needs to be for the adults and made with a certain sense of class. If you're like me and this kind of thing would appeal to you, as you could obviously tell from the lingo I used earlier, then please consider sharing this podcast around the Alvin and the Chipmunks fan communities. With all that said, you're welcome to leave a like, subscribe, check out some of my other videos, and leave a suggestion for a future chipmunk topic that you'd like me to talk about. Thank you for your support, and have a nice day.